Hello, folks, and welcome to Bards and Books. I'm Usman. I'm joined by Nick, as always. This is our LitRPG chat, and today is He Who Fights with Monsters, Book 1 by Shirtaloon, aka Travis Deverell. I will include a list to our playlist for all the previous books we've covered. We've covered all of Dungeon Crawler Carl and the first book of Wandering Inn, so you can check that out if you so wish. But let's talk about this one. So, He Who Fights with Monsters. This is a long series. It's got 11 books out so far.
It's 11 books. Just the 11th book just came out recently.
Yeah. So, you know what? But I think they're about half the length of the Wandering Inn. At least this first book was half the length of the Wandering Inn audiobook. So, there's that.
Yeah, they shrink down as it goes down too. It's like as they go along, he kind of like only puts a little bit shorter as it goes.
Let's start with we'll do spoiler free and then go to spoilers after, since this is a book 1. So our spoiler free thoughts on He Who Fights with Monsters. Now you've read this multiple times. You've done this multiple times on audio. As always, we're doing this on audiobook. What are your thoughts, spoiler free, on book 1?
Well, it was one of the first kind of books that I read in LitRPG kind of series. It's a good like starter into LitRPG, I think. I really liked it the first couple times I read it. It was just something to kind of like while I was at work to kind of put on, and it wasn't a podcast. So it was kind of like, you had that build up, and I liked how the characters and the side characters all kind of went together. It was a very interesting world, world building. It wasn't kind of like the same stuff that you get in a lot of either isekai or medieval kind of settings. You don't gonna get this. It's a very different setting.
Yeah,
I kind of liked, and made it very interesting for me. But
different sort of format. You said this was the first you started with?
Yeah, well, it was one of the first for sure.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
very early on, I kind of started listening to stuff like this.
Okay.
And,
it worked for you.
It worked for me when I started it. I mean, yeah, I've read it a couple of times just because it's a longer book. And, on an 8-hour day, it kind of like, you got to listen to this book over 3 days. So it kind of, keeps a bit of your time.
Yeah. See, for diving into LitRPG, I think this for me seemed like you're like a typical good starting point. It's got all those LitRPG elements, but it's I don't know, the pacing. Maybe it's something to do with the pacing, but it's like introductory level. At least this book 1 was for me for LitRPG. You get the basics of how things work in a setting like this, and like the leveling up, the gaining attributes kind of thing, right? So
it doesn't bog down with that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
kind of goes more into story instead of like bogging you down with like levels and numbers and like this stat boost and this percentage. And it's like, I'm not here for a math class. This is it's kind of like that early game. Like there's some stuff going on. Don't worry about it. It's good. It gives you some stats to kind of like, hey, you're leveling up a little bit. This guy's leveling up a little bit. Here's some growth in this character.
Yeah.
Or it is power, but you don't have to really be calculating. Is this math adding up here? You don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Definitely light on the math. There were like a few sections where he's just listing off these attributes that they've gained. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to remember all of that, but like you get the gist of it. And I think that's just sort of how it works for LitRPG. You're not supposed to remember all these attributes and stats or whatever. It's just like you get the gist of what's happening, kind of their area of expertise and like new abilities they might have, but that's really it,
Yeah. It's more. I almost want to kind of say it almost relates more to like a Pokemon game where he's got all these abilities, and they kind of change over time, but he's kind of stacking up his abilities. But it doesn't really, you don't have to worry about it. They'll tell you as it goes on,
Yeah.
You don't have to make a list or anything like that. You
Yeah.
just gotta understand how the book works, and it's not really about that as much as the characters, like, or the
Hmm.
environment that
Yeah.
they're in.
Now, speaking on that, I will say, so I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. That was a generous 4 stars. I gotta say, it was just over mediocre for me. I think a lot of that has to do with we started with Dungeon Crawler Carl, man. I don't like starting with Dungeon Crawler Carl is a good way
That's a pretty good book.
to make everything else you read just to have to live up to Dungeon Crawler Carl series. That's
Probably
a
not a good one to start
that's
on,
a
is
high
it?
bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a high bar. So I'm trying to be a little more objective and really cling to aspects that I like. Some things I liked. There were some very interesting characters. You know, especially the main characters. They come up with abilities and stuff you don't expect.
Mm.
Like, say what you will about this being a typical lit RPG introduction journey. The main character, he does not acquire the things you would expect him to. He doesn't end up going down a path you would expect
Mm.
for a typical protagonist, let's say. And there were a lot of cool characters to latch on to. Um, One thing I wasn't a huge fan of was the world building. I felt as though we could have got more description.
Mm.
It was I didn't feel really grounded in the setting. Let's say
Okay.
I
Okay.
didn't know, like, yeah, I couldn't get a good sense of where we were, what we were, how things looked around us.
Mm.
That's one thing, but I think the plot makes up for that a lot.
I guess for me, I mean, I guess it's because I've read it a couple of times that I mean, to be honest, I've read the whole series at this point up to the book 11, so I
Okay.
know what's going on, and I'm gonna be on my best behavior and try not to spoil things for Usman here.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna try to keep with what I know from each book and not spoil anything. So I'm not gonna say
Yes.
anything. Also, in the comments, try not to spoil anything for Usman here
Hmm.
because things change and groups change and whatever happens. So don't be spoiling nothing for Usman here.
Yeah, 11 books in, that I get
Yeah, I mean,
that can be tough.
I know a lot of, I know basically everything that's, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think part of it is I kind of can visualize the environment a little bit better because of that. Because
Okay.
when they mention something, it's been mentioned to me basically 6 times already, at
Yeah.
least for me, so that I can kind of like understand, like, okay, well, oh, so that's kind of what it looks like, and I just kind of like once it gets mentioned once, I mean, if you put it down and pick it back up again, because it is, what is it, 30 hours long or something like that, 35
Yeah.
hours or something,
I think it's around 30,
something like
maybe a little
that.
less, something like that.
Yeah. So like if you're gonna go through it, it's like by the time you've done listening to the book, you've don't really think about what the environment was in the first book or for the first couple hours when they describe, like, you know, you don't remember that they're reed doors or something like that. They don't have like
Hmm.
wooden doors, or wood is rare in that area. So I kind of like, well, I could kind of pick it apart more because I've heard it multiple times. But
Yeah, I guess so. And it would
eh,
probably get better with, each book.
which I
You
guess
get more familiar.
is part of it. I think that's part of it for me, is that I've read it multiple times. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah,
kind of like the environments a lot.
that's
But
fair.
but I understand now that, like, coming from you, it's like, yeah, I guess they don't really talk about it that much, you
Yeah.
know.
But, I've read a book, so I physically read a book in the past where it had the same sort of issue. I
Mm,
didn't like I couldn't feel grounded in this world. I felt in that book I felt like I'm witnessing these characters do things in like a void of darkness. I couldn't even get a sense of the setting at all.
mm,
But here it's not that bad, and I think the audio format helps a lot with,
yeah,
like, just I don't know, someone just
it feels like realer. Like,
if
you're
yeah.
it, it, like your mind can kind of paint a picture while they're hearing it in your ears rather than looking at page and trying to like paint a picture in your mind while you're reading it
That's
yourself.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
I can get that.
yeah, but getting away from that, obviously this is book one. There was a lot of setup that happened
Mm,
in this, getting to know all these characters, the dynamic of this world, things that are going on. Obviously you're gonna get that with the book one, but I will say it was interesting enough. I mean, the magic systems, um,
yes.
like the character, especially the main character, with how
Hmm.
you get a good sense of his personality, maybe midway through or partway through the book. It's super interesting enough to definitely continue.
Yeah,
So we'll just say it right now. I'm continuing. I will be continuing with book two.
sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, especially at the end of this book, I mean, I realized as I was kind of refreshing myself, I'm like, oh yeah, he probably wants to get the second book too, because there's there's a couple of cliffhangers at the end of book one where it really kind of book
there
two is
was,
where
but
stuff kind of
yeah,
takes off.
yeah, there
So
was.
that
But
is
you
a
see, I can't remember any like immediate cliffhangers. I was thinking of like looming cliffhangers,
yes.
like with the main character, his last line, you
Hmm.
know, and like I want to see where his journey goes because this character is interesting.
As you said, it's a good book to start off on a journey into lit RPG. But
Yeah.
I feel like it has very easy villains and very easy protagonists. How it kind of builds almost like a D&D party kind of
Hmm.
aspect, where it's like not everybody has the same roles.
Yeah.
People do different things. You're not all kind of trying to be the same good best person you can be.
Hmm.
Everybody's like, well, everybody kind of fits their own role,
Yeah.
and you kind of build your guy to be this role person that fits in this role. And how the world has like almost tiered levels where like they're kind of in he gets spawned off in basically the newbie area, but
Mm.
not everybody is born in the newbie area. I think it's a nice light read if you want to get into this, and you can crank out every book and they're
Mm.
not too hard. You can, I gotta say, by you know, you, maybe you might get annoyed by some of the characters by the end.
Mm.
Um, but overall, I
A
think it's an
rollicking
easy.
good time, you'd
Oh
say.
yeah, yeah. I think it's an easy read. I don't think it's a hard read. Uh, I don't think it's a very dark read. There's maybe some elements that might be dark, but and it might deal with some death a little bit. But I don't think there's anything excessively dark in this,
Yeah.
despite what the main character might say. Um,
Yeah.
I think overall it's a
Yeah.
pretty easy read,
And
pretty light
yeah.
read.
And
You know,
interesting.
yeah.
Interesting.
I don't think I'd be reading it with your kids.
No.
Uh,
No. No.
but I think overall it's a very video game feel.
Good.
That's all I gotta say.
All right.
I guess I would say like I said, I did do 4 stars.
Fair enough.
I mean for the first one, honestly, I would rate it a 5-star book,
I think you
but
did
a very
actually when you
light.
were active on Goodreads. Didn't you
Yeah,
give
I
this
think I
five
did
stars?
give it a 5 stars. I think I did give it a 5 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's only because I would say 5 stars. I'll say 5 stars for this one. I liked it. Yeah.
I mean, you read it multiple times, so you got to
I
like
read
it.
it multiple
Yeah.
times, so maybe that's part of the reason why it's kind of gone down over time for me. But I think that's because I'm nitpicking now that I've heard it
Yeah.
so many times.
Fair enough. All right. I think that'll do it for the spoiler-free section. Let us jump into spoilers because
Hmm.
I got some stuff to talk about.
Let's
Now
hear it, man.
let's go back to
I'm
the main
excited to
character.
hear. I'm
All right.
excited to hear what you have to say.
So Jason,
Mm.
I will say right off the bat when he gets spawned into this world, you know, like where the hell am I? Blah blah blah. All this, he's learning all this stuff. I didn't click with his attitude right away. I thought it
Mm.
was too nonchalant, too
Hmm.
sarcastic.
Hmm.
I'm like, is this really how things would play out? But the more you come to realize what kind of a person Jason is, it's not just the Aussie humor. I thought at first it's like maybe this is just Aussie humor,
Mm.
but it's really just the way Jason is,
Yeah.
his personality, the way he deals with things, you know.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I guess he redeemed himself for me later on in the book, partway through the book, because at first I'm like, I mean, this isn't how I don't think anyone would be as soon as they enter a random world like this. But
I mean, how many times do you wake up naked and you're just like, yeah, I guess this is what I mean. Maybe I had a stroke.
Oh, I don't have pants. Well, let's just take a walk.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, I kind of get that. I definitely get that. I mean, it's an interesting starting point, you know. And I mean, at least he doesn't wake up and he's like not crying and having an existential crisis. He's like, well, am I going to stand around here? Or am I going to keep walking and
that's
figuring
right.
things out?
Opposite,
So
sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. And
yeah,
honestly, I would prefer that over crying and breaking down.
yeah, kind of doesn't.
Maybe that's a little too real.
Yeah, I
a
mean,
little too real.
if I woke up in a hedge maze, I probably wouldn't cry and break down. I don't know about you. What did you think about the screens thing for him?
Oh, right, the screens. So that's the format of how
Yes,
you can view your stats or whatever. These screens you get.
but
It's
only him.
only him.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
see, I knew he had the screens thing. I didn't know. I didn't realize that was only him. Okay.
That's this little thing, like Clive or whatever. Is like, oh, I use your screens to like when it got the party system.
Right.
So nobody else. No, they all kind of get their powers when they get a power. They kind of get it in their mind. They're like, oh, I kind of have like like how how you're to move your fingers and your arms. Like, oh,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a sixth sense. They figure out how to use their powers that way.
It's
Instead of
interesting. It's interesting that it's unique to him
Mhm.
because you also learn that he wasn't just like randomly spawned in this world. He was summoned, correct?
Mhm.
That's right. Like
Kind of
some summoning
by
gone
accident.
wrong, summoned by
Yeah.
accident. Yes.
Mhm.
So that's very interesting. I don't think I haven't come across any storyline where it's like a human is summoned to this world.
Yeah. I mean, yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Okay.
But
Well,
yeah, I mean, but that is a pretty big theme for this kind of stories. That
okay.
they do kind of have a summoning kind of aspect, or they have like a end of the world kind of thing, like the first book we read, the Did You Call It Carl book.
Yeah.
But this is one of the big major themes they often do, besides
Okay.
getting hit by a truck or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
It's a good way to start off.
Yeah.
I think having the screens is also a good way for us to kind of it helps him understand how the world works, but it also helps us understand how powers work in the world and describe to us as if he got it the same way as everybody else does, where it's like, oh, it's just like a sixth sense. It would be harder for them to us to put it into our mindset. Like, how does that
Yeah.
work? When it
Yeah.
kind of gets related as like a Pokemon power or
Hmm.
like something like that, it makes it a lot easier to kind of understand.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Mm.
Like I said, the setting was maybe not as descriptive as I would have liked. Just a little bit. I like a little bit. I don't like too much description. A little bit here and there is nice.
Maybe a little bit more in this, and you would like it a little bit more descriptive.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I can kind of agree. I wish there was a little bit more. I liked how they described things. Maybe that's part of it. I liked how the world was built.
Mm-hmm.
If I got some more description in the world, that'd be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. But anyways, back to Jason. So he's just going through this world. Doesn't have much of a care, it seems. And then he deals with some stuff, the cannibal cult or whatever, and then he meets his companions, right? So Rufus, who's the other one? Gareth,
Yeah, Gareth Zandir, Gary,
Gary,
and
and
Farah.
Farah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
go through a lot of training as well. So there's a section where he's just going through town, meeting new characters. Just slice of life type of thing. There's some of that, and then there's a lot of training montage scenes, right, where he's building up, or he's applying to get into the academy, something like that, right?
Yeah. He's basically doing his learner's license to become an adventurer.
Right.
Yeah. He's got his learner's license done, and then he's going to do his end test, and he's got to drive around for a month and make sure he doesn't crash into any buildings, but in adventurer terms. So don't kill yourself.
Yeah.
Probably later on in the book, one of my favorite bits is probably when he first, the second time he meets Amir Bahadir. God,
Okay.
Amir Bahadir. Oh Lord,
that's the guy that gets introduced at the end.
Basically, yeah, he was one of the dreads in the cloud palace.
Sort of badass dude, right?
Yeah, he's a gold ranker. That's the other thing we didn't really talk about is that the ranking system.
Yes, interesting.
But, yeah.
I like that.
We'll hold on to that for a second.
Yeah.
But I like that. My favorite moment was probably when he was like, he does have this kind of air about him. This the Jason character has, like, he's kind of thinks very highly of himself because he has these knowledge from another world. He's kind of dropping some lore bits, and he gets into a little bit of trouble with that. I guess it's a spoiler part, so I can kind of say, but it's so late in the book. It's so late in the book that I don't really want to. That part was probably my favorite part. I like that. It was kind of funny. It had a bit of comedy in there. He's like, don't tell people about gravity. They don't know about gravity here. Easy now. If they think it's magic, leave it alone. They got to figure it out by themselves. You can't just be like telling them, the moon does
just
that.
Dropping all these
That's
bombs
why there's waves. You can't be just dropping bombs.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts. Some of the adventure stuff he was doing was fantastic. Really interesting. The catching the robbers bit. There's a lot of like highs and lows in this book where it kind of like there's a bit of like the training montage and like daily life, and then there's some big points where it's like, some battles that it goes up, or when the sand pirates come, and there's this kind of like this flow of this book where it kind of like does a lot of small highs and lows rather than like a very low and then it goes high and then it drops down and then maybe it's like all just kind of like a wave sign throughout the whole book.
It flowed well. I will say, I can attest to that.
You can maybe do like maybe 3 short books out of this if you cut it in the right spots, but it was nice that it was just kind of very flowy book instead. Very long but flowy book.
Here's one aspect that I'm not sure how I feel about it was when Jason started to get pretty philosophical, when he was talking to characters, talking about, was it like good and evil, and how he all of a sudden turned into a bit of a philosopher.
Yeah. I didn't really, I mean, I don't know if maybe it's where we're from and where the author is from. Maybe it's just a different viewpoint from a different point in the world where they think a certain way. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
It really contrasted with how we met him.
He does this kind of like odd flipping where he goes, either it's like, I'm a happy fun guy character,
and then all of a sudden just starts dropping these knowledge bombs, this wisdom that seems to come out of nowhere almost.
But it's almost like not like a moody teen, almost not really like a wisdomy person. It's more like, teenagers telling you like, don't trust the government or something like that, rather than, or like, poo-poo religion, rather than
he wasn't really like,
an adult dropping a knowledge bomb, It
was more like just matters of fact that he was just
the
same way he's saying, well, it's it's cold because it's ice. That's why, they're like, it has to do with the weather. That's why. What do you mean? It's like more like that, like just delivering it. This is just the way it is.
Sure.
So that's how I felt. But it was a bit of a, I want to say it was a little jarring, like seeing him at the beginning like that, and then all of a sudden this philosophical Jason that we got. It was interesting. I liked what he was saying, but it was just
for sure. I understand that. It was just a little bit where it's like, where sometimes when I was talking to Humphrey, And Humphrey's just like, I thought what you did is that, and he's like, you can't just tell him, yeah, no, I was doing that to kind of, scare them or be a badass or to try to win the fight. So I kind of acted like that. So, what do you think? It's like, okay, well, maybe you're landing on a little thick there, buddy. And maybe that's my 6th time reading it. Maybe that's why I feel that way. That's probably part of it, where it's like that's maybe not as philosophical when you hear it 6 times.
I see.
Just, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It was kind of cool because he was talking about, it kind of tied into his abilities that he was gaining as well. Because he's gaining all these abilities, and it's like what like an evil wizard or something would have. It's what like antagonist sort of powers that he's gaining, but he's the protagonist. So it's cool, right? I mean when he gets the leech familiar, like
familiar,
the leeches. Oh my god, it's so gross.
So cool power, such a cool power.
It's so interesting, but it's like, they like dig into his skin and
I love how he named it Colin too.
Colin.
It's just like kind of like, it's like, this is like it's like a world eater worm, or what is it called? World eater something, leeches or something.
Yeah.
And he's just like, gonna name him Colin. Yeah. But it's my pal Colin.
But it was interesting how he's gaining all these, evil abilities, but
they sound so dark. They sound so dark.
Sound so dark.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not.
No, they sound very dark, and he's like, even everybody around him is kind of like a joke. It's like, are you the guy with the evil powers?
Yeah.
No.
And people are just
I'm the lighthearted guy. I got the funny accent.
Yeah. That's a very interesting dynamic. I like how that was explored. So kudos to Travis Deverell for that.
So you did get the 3 essences, and that gives you the confluence essence.
Yep.
And then there are the awakening stones that give you the powers. So every time you get an essence, you get a free power, but then you need awakening stones to get the rest of them. And then you get your full set of abilities, and then you don't have to worry about that anymore. Basically, that's how the power system works. Yep. Then you have to like level up by using the monster cores, which some people do. That instead of training and your abilities and fighting monsters, you can just kind of use XP stones, basically. And if you're just kind of a city dweller and you don't want to risk your life, that's kind of how that system worked. But in order to be a proper adventurer, as they say, you got to get into battles and gain XP by fighting monsters and using your abilities. And every time you use your ability, you get a little more experience.
Yeah. And then there's ranks too, right?
And then there's ranks. So once you get your abilities to the maximum ability of your rank. So once you start...
You start in iron, correct?
Yep. Once you get all your essences, you start at iron rank.
Okay.
And then that is the lowest amount of magic a person can have. That more of that stuff comes like way later.
Okay. We'll get a lot of that in later books.
Yeah. They kind of hint at it here. They mention something about diamond rank and people who live forever, and they don't really come around. It's almost kind of like a medieval system, right? Where it's like, lords and then, kings, and like kind of comes down, right? It's like a trickle down system where everybody else doesn't have any powers, they're basically just, the poorest of poor people. They're serfs or slaves almost, but like serfs. And that as you get powers, you can kind of become a knight and then work your way up to a lord. And then you that's how the power seems to work. It's like they have it, as the ranks get higher, you have more say in the world. Like your word means a lot more. Oh, that guy's gold rank. He just nobody has any more power than he does. He's the top dog whenever he comes to town because he's got a higher rank than everybody else.
Yeah.
So the biggest people in the town, for the most part, are silver ranks in this story.
Okay.
And then you have the bronze rank people like Rufus, right? And then the iron rankers are the people who are just starting off. And I think like Jason's in his 20s, but most people when they start off, like all the other characters are like 16. Like Humphrey's like 16 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like teenagers. So he's hanging out with all these teenagers. He's like, Jesus Christ. And they're all like fighting monsters and like he's like, they're risking their lives at that age.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. And being an older guy. So that's why he's kind of got this kind of attitude like
There's some hierarchy for sure. There's some maybe some elitism with certain characters, right?
for sure.
Where did the plot go after? Remind me again. After, so he starts adventuring. He gets his abilities, has some philosophical chats, and he meets. What about the side characters? Clive and
Yes.
Humphrey, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, side characters is one of my favorite bits. What's your favorite character? Side character.
My favorite.
There's a lot. There's a lot of characters.
There were a lot of characters. I'm not too sure. I mean, I mainly just latched onto the main party, like Rufus, Gareth, Farah.
You weren't down for that Vincent Trenslow, this guy with the mustache.
Oh yes, I remember. Yeah. He was all right.
They're like, this guy's got a mustache.
There wasn't too much of him.
No, it wasn't too much of him, but I think that he was a good kind of comedic end. You know.
So you really latched onto the characters in this.
I think I do. I think a lot of the side characters, I think they're creative.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of books, the side characters kind of fall flat. You know, where this one, they're very creative and everybody's a little bit different. You know, from Clive being the nerdy guy, but then he's also an eel farmer. You think he's going to be some haughty toddy guy, but he's not. To even the villains are odd. Like Lucian Lamprey. He's like an elf guy, but he's the most jacked elf you've ever seen in your life. He's like a fucking triangle. And he's like, but he's also a fucking predator, basically. He's a terrible person. And so all the characters I think were great. Great design. The Bertinellis, fantastic. As you're going for like a great naming convention for an NPC, right? You're like, that guy, oh, he's Bert. They're all Bert. There's like 6 Berts.
Right.
One of them's Albert. One's they're all different Berts. Oh, that's Bertries. No, we're just calling me Bert. We're all Bert.
Yes.
Oh, you must be talking about my brother. He sells fruit. It's just cross the river. Yeah. No, I'm not the same Bert. That's my brother. It's like great naming convention for an NPC. It might seem a little bit lazy, but I think it's a hilarious way to go.
It was very humorous. Yeah.
Yeah.
When it works, right?
It does.
Humor. So that was cool. I also thought the pair, Sophie and the other girl.
Sophie and
they were like thieves, right? Or one of them was a thief.
Sophie and Belinda.
Right.
So they're both kind of thieves. Sophie's more of the fighter, speedy getaway person.
Yeah.
And then Belinda's more of the mastermind. So very interesting characters. Kind of got the more I've read the story, honestly, the darker their story kind of is. Listening to this time, I'm like, Jesus Christ. That what Sophie had to deal with, where it's like, has Lucian Lamprey coming at her, like just dark sexual predator stuff, which is, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's so dark.
Yeah. Right.
That part, I mean, like they glaze over it. But I'm like, that after all the times I've listened to it, I'm like, oh, that's really dark. Jesus.
I guess there wasn't much else after all that. The plot it ends up with this big fight at the end, right? And then
that's like the crescendo, right? Where okay, it's hard to kind of go about this. Because the book goes always up and down. His big character build up from Jason getting his adventuring license and working his way up to be a 3-star iron ranker you know, working his way up from first 1 star to 2 star, 3 star, kind of working his way up to get to like the highest level of adventurer an Iron Ranker can do. Like he's getting special quests because that's who he is. And you know, then everybody else goes on this trip to go inside a astral space, which is one of the things that's part of this world because there's so much magic in this world and the world that Jason's from. Basically, our world kind of thing doesn't have any magic in it. This world does. That's why it's got so much buildup. It's got these astral spaces of buildup of magic that sends it basically a portal to more planet, basically.
Right.
And they're kind of like sealed off, and people aren't supposed to really go into them.
Yeah. You know, an interesting point of suspense was the fact that Jason has this World Phoenix token that could send him back to his planet, and how he's just contemplating whether or not he should use it, and he just holds on to it.
Well, he can't just use it as well. It's like it'll just work, and he doesn't know when that'll happen.
Oh, that's so at any point.
At any point, it's like either as the Priestess Knowledge says, is like, you know, if you don't want to go back, get rid of it.
Get rid of it, yeah.
Yeah. Because you don't know how to use it and you don't have fortitude, I would say, to use this thing right now.
Yeah.
But it might work for you eventually. And
just spontaneously?
Well, there has to be a certain certain things have to be in motion for it to work. So many interesting things about this character and the world, the kind of gamey designs of it. I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you're saying, they go into most of the town goes into the astral space. All kind of the high lordy people, they all get sent off so that the Adventure Society lady can like fix the town, basically. Like the secondary mayor of the town basically can fix the town.
Yeah.
Sends them all off, thinking it's like going to be a light, you know, duty mission, and it ends up being a devastating mission where lots of people die. And I guess we can kind of, this is a spoiler portion of it. So we can say that one of the main side characters, I want to say.
I just remember Farah's death.
It's a trampled mess of a corpse at the end because of the battle. It's a war zone.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, there's like people fighting over corpses. Like people are just like
brutal.
Fighting and just standing on dead people. And it's, what are you going to do? You know?
Right. Yeah. That was a brutal scene.
I think doesn't Rufus get his arm cut off or something like that? But they reattaches afterwards. But you know, other stuff, something like that happens. It's like pretty messed up.
Yeah, well, pretty dark.
It gets pretty dark, and it's at the end of they're dealing with the loss of somebody's life, and you know it's not easy.
So, yeah, at that point, I was pretty invested, and then when Jason ends things off with, you know, don't you want to find out the possibilities that I can achieve with like his attributes, his skills, and whatnot? I think someone was telling him that like there's some danger lurking or something, and he's like, well, let's explore.
Yeah,
something like that, right?
Yeah.
The end.
This is the first book is very good introduction to the characters, and it brings a lot of characters to the forefront, like where, you know, all the like Clive Standish and, you know, Humphrey and, you know, all that stuff. What do you think about the Mercers?
Remind me again who the
Mercers. The Mercers is Cassandra Mercer, which is Jason's girlfriend. Thadwick Mercer is this kind of like, if you go from Harry Potter, he's like Draco Malfoy character.
Right. He's the guy who's like,
guy.
He's the guy who's like, oh, but my father's, you know, this and that.
My father will hear about this. Do you know who my uncle is? That guy.
Yes. You know, annoying.
And then his older sister is like this high society lady that Jason wins over. You know,
Interesting.
So,
Like I said, these are interesting characters. Obviously, you latched onto them a lot more than I did.
I mean, I guess I've had a lot of books to read into them and get attached to a
Right.
lot of these
Right.
characters,
So
where you
what you're
haven't
saying
yet.
is this series gets really, really good.
I mean, it gets pretty good. Yeah, I gotta say, I'm not gonna say a particular book or a particular time what I really enjoyed. I'm not
Right.
gonna go that far into it.
Okay.
Um, I've made some notes here, and I'm going. Before I started, I went over these notes. I'm like, oh no, that's book 2. Oh, I can't say that. Oh no. Oh no. All right.
Yeah.
This isn't. They have no. I can't even say the name of the group. I can't even say that because that's not even for like 5 books from now. Oh,
Good.
no.
Yeah.
It's like I gotta be like, you can't look at the. Don't Google any of this because it's so far ahead.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting enough, enjoyable enough for me to want to continue. So I will be continuing with book 2.
I feel like we gotta be light on this first one because it's like it's just kind of
Lots
an
of setup.
enjoyable book. There's lots of setup, but lots of like, as I said, ups and downs. It's a very easy book to read. You don't need to spoil anything. There's nothing that's
Yeah.
gonna be like, oh, this part was the excitement that I've had at this part was like crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
It was never. There's nothing of that in this book really, but it was like there's some good parts, very interesting parts, but it's kind of like it was a very smooth book.
Yeah. Do the
You know,
rest of the books have the same sort of flow, or do they change pace or structure a little bit?
they do change pace and structure a little bit. I'm not. I can't say each book because it's that kind of there's some.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
does kind of do a theme with how he does his books,
Okay.
where every set amount of books. We're not going to go into it, but there's the big cliffhanger, or the things some things change, and he does
Okay.
like here's what happened while this thing was going on, and
Okay. Yeah.
there's some other timepieces where this
Yeah.
is what was going on while this person was doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Can't really talk about it
Mm-hmm.
without spoiling anything. But
Okay.
we will have a few books yet before you come to that.
All right.
But this is
Well.
basically the first couple books are kind of very much of building this character. He spends
Yeah.
a lot of time in lower ranks in this one and building himself up and world building, character building, how the fighting system works.
Okay.
And this is kind of how this book works, and building some world, building some character development.
Well, I'm looking forward to book 2. So our next chat will be for book 2.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
excited for it.
All right. Anything else you want to cover? Anything else we may have left out? Last words.
There's lots we've left out, but I don't feel like they're not. We don't need to be
not too
going
important.
into every single detail. This is more of a like, you should just read this book.
Yeah.
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 This is like, it's a fun, easy reading book. It's not like, oh my God, this is the most crazy thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic book, and I think, if you were into LitRPG and you haven't heard about this book, you should probably read this book.
Yeah.
As much as I mean, it's been out there for a while.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I enjoy the series. Thank you, Travis Deverell, for you providing me a lot of entertainment over my time reading.
I mean, it's a pretty popular series. It's one of the first series I heard about when I even discovered LitRPG, right? Through you, even through just like seeing it in places, other people talking about it.
Reddit,
kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So, good on him, man.
Yes.
It's one of those things where it's like it made me think about, even you talking about it, like maybe I should write a book. Yeah, I'll try my hand at it too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
That'd be cool.
I'll be able to.
I think we'll end things off here. So great chat, very enjoyable book, and our next chat will be for book 2. So continuing on, but as always, thank you for joining me for leveling up, man. This has been fun, and I guess we'll see everybody next time.
All right, take it easy.